So now what we're going to do, and it's fair to say that in Australia we do have state rivalries. Sometimes they're healthy, often they're very healthy, but the states are very proud of themselves. I'm going to now introduce you to Corey Germain, who's Director Health and Technology Investment Attraction, Trade and Investment, New South Wales Treasury. Corey, that's a very impressive title. And I understand that you're also going to give us some slides. Show us through a number of slides to give us, our viewers, a real indication of what's going on in New South Wales, and maybe we'll have time for a question or two after that. Over to you, Corey.
Excellent, thank you, Andrew. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Thumbs up, Andrew, if I'm being heard, and if everyone can see my opening slide there. I want to thank Andrew and the team and my colleagues from other states. And as well, obviously, the participants here for getting up quite early to meet us and discuss all things FinTech Australia. As Andrew mentioned, the title's probably a long-winded way of saying my job is to really sit back and support you in your growth plans and looking at Australia as a market, looking at why Sydney makes sense for your business, not necessarily positioning Sydney or New South Wales as the leading state, but more talking about how we can support your business and what makes business sense for you to come in and get set up. I am not a two-man team or a one-man team as I am today, but I do have colleagues and offices in the UK. Just a shout out to Kiara Smith, who may or may not be on the call, and happy to connect all of the companies online to our UK office. Kiara is fantastic at answering questions and helping support you on the ground from the UK. So it's been an interesting time, I think, for probably everyone online in terms of how we go about as governments in attracting investment and creating jobs. New South Wales and Sydney in particular do view their financial sector as a competitive advantage, and FinTech being an offshoot supporting that sector. So what I'm going to do today is walk you through a bit about what's happening here in Sydney, a bit about the FinTech sector, very specifically speaking to the competitive advantages, more importantly, the specific business drivers that we feel will go to making a case for why you want to set up in New South Wales and in Sydney. And then I'll talk a bit, as my colleagues did with Invest Victoria, around how we can support you in your market entry. The New South Wales government at the moment, like most governments around the world, are looking at how do we go about stimulating and attracting investment into the FinTech and the financial services space. We've gone ahead with an approach of looking at creating places that foster ecosystems that support the development of both innovative solutions in FinTech, but more importantly, help overseas companies looking to scale in this space find affordable space and integrate themselves into those ecosystems. So for everyone on the call today, 3 key takeaways I wanted to get across before I get into the nitty gritty. First off, Sydney as a state capital ranks in the top 10 globally as recognized financial capital, behind New York, London, and Hong Kong, top 7 in Asia Pac, with very strong linkages to the Asia Pac region. So we see and position Sydney as a place not only to access domestic customer pathways, but also build relationships and connections to foreign banks, particularly Asian banks that are set up here in Sydney, and I can go through that in a bit further detail. The second key area that I wanted to highlight was that New South Wales here is to support all your key business drivers. So the key business drivers that I'll highlight today are around your customer ecosystem. So who's here, who's doing what from foreign banks, domestic banks, as well as the downstream and upstream FinTech sector, and how we can go about connecting you into that. The innovative R&D and commercialization track record that Sydney and New South Wales have posted over the last multitude of decades. And of course, the access to growing and sophisticated pool of talent. And I think, Andrew, you had hit the nail on the head. One of the key competitive advantages we see of New South Wales and Sydney is around accessing, particularly in the center of Sydney, are 4 major universities that have a large number of STEM graduates. And of course, building a cluster of Sydney's FinTech and scaling technology companies in the center of Sydney CBD. In terms of the type of support we'll go through today, really is looking at how we go about supporting your business case and justifying the entry into the Australian market, supporting key market intelligence and key industry introductions, and again, suitable site selection. And I'll highlight some of those key areas around the Sydney CBD and the affordable space model that we are looking at. And of course, exploration of funding programs at all three levels of government. So our assistance can be to sort of look at what exactly you're looking to create, how you're looking at expanding and entering the market, and then matching that with the appropriate funds. Just kicking off, in terms of fintech in Australia, I won't go to this through in too much detail. My colleagues at Invest Victoria, I think, painted a great picture of why Australia. Just wanted to highlight from a Global Financial Centers Index in 2019, as well as a Global FinTech Index in 2020. Sydney has ranked in the top 10 in terms of global centers and in the top 15 in terms of global fintech, which we see underpins a lot of the, ultimately the R&D and commercialization that's happening in this space, and I'll go through some specific examples. A few key growth stories that we highlight, case studies, I think for everyone online will be very familiar with Volt as well as Neobank, Jinja, who've recently launched and raised capital here in Sydney. One particular fantastic growth story we've had here in the last 5 years was around MasterCard's Global Tech Hub being located here in Sydney and creating a 550 jobs specifically dedicated to the PSB solutions that MasterCard offers, as well as its data security measures. So happy to talk through some of that. One of the key areas from a ecosystem and scale up potential that we see New South Wales contributing to your potential future success in Australia is looking at the number of startups and scale ups located here in Sydney. And as you can see from the slide here, there is a large portion located in New South Wales. The government has invested in a variety of assets, including a Sydney Startup Hub that plays host to a variety of accelerators and incubators, including Stone and Chalk, which I think was mentioned as well, where we've got roughly about 2,600 companies registered and growing in a government asset-owned Sydney Startup Hub in the center of Sydney. The government is looking to mimic that model and looking at a scale-up growth asset in the center of Sydney as well that will support, again, companies in the fintech space coming in, and we can connect you to the folks that can talk through that. So again, some highlights on the right-hand side, looking at the investment activity in Australia as a whole, as well as the, I think, the overall struggles that the industry is having in terms of investment from last year to this year. So given some of those challenges, Sydney and New South Wales have been very successful, and I've put three examples here of VCs that have raised capital here in Australia successfully. In terms of the customer pathway and the ecosystem, as I was talking about earlier, this slide is very, very busy, so I apologize, but what we wanted to point out here, again, you'll see some of the names on the left-hand side of potential customers. As mentioned, we've got all of the big four banks here, as well as a strong pension industry. We've got a variety of large commercial US banks that have set up in Sydney over the last 5 years. And again, key players in the market developing technology in and around blockchain, AI, and quantum that have partnered with both Sydney-based universities and some of the private sector. On the right-hand side, again, some of our universities and accelerators that can support your business and your innovative activities, highlighting that Sydney does play host to the likes of ASIC, ASIO, and others that do support and regulate the financial services sector in Australia. A little bit more on the Sydney's fintech ecosystem. Here we wanted to highlight a number of innovative businesses that had won awards that had offices based out in Sydney. On the right-hand side, you'll see some familiar names. Also wanted to highlight some, the FinTech Bridge deal that was a UK-Australian partnership deal that was created in 2018 that plays host to reducing barriers through regulatory and compliance cooperation that I think is worth for everybody to take a look at and perhaps reach out if you have any questions. Just in terms of a snapshot of Sydney's fintech ecosystem, I wanted to highlight a few key areas here, particularly around the venture capital with a focus on fintech. So as you can see, these are all organizations including H2 Ventures, Reinvention Group, Sapient Ventures, and Apex Capital that have headquarters in Sydney. So for those companies looking to scale come to Sydney looking for customers and then look at raising capital. There is a vibrant capital raising economy here in New South Wales that you can take advantage of. Just for the sake of time, I might quickly go through another investment driver that we like to highlight here in New South Wales is looking at R&D capabilities. So positioning Sydney, particularly on the right-hand side around our blockchain capabilities. I've highlighted here a program that exists with CSR Aurora and Data 61, supporting a variety of programs focused on transactions and quantum data. Again, I'm happy to field questions on any of these programs following this sessions. Sydney also plays host to a variety of knowledge hubs focused on fintech, and I've listed a few here on the left-hand side, again, through our University of Technology Sydney, as well as through our CSRO and Data 61. We've got quite a few research institutes focused on enabling technologies, as mentioned, between blockchain, quantum, and artificial intelligence to support the sector. To a point Andrew had made earlier, we wanted to highlight Sydney and New South Wales' competitive advantage in accessing talent. As you can see, sort of compared to other states, the number of graduates coming out of the universities, particularly in central Sydney, where we see a host of STEM graduates within our city centre. So between the University of New South Wales, University of Sydney, University of Technology Sydney, it is estimated that roughly annually we graduate about 63,000 in the IT engineering and related technology space, and play host to more than 160,000 STEM graduates over the last 10 years here in New South Wales. So again, from a business growth perspective, Sydney and New South Wales can play a major role in supporting your growth. We've got a digital TAFE program, which is a vocational training program centered in Sydney, in and around the university, supporting, again, graduates in more hands-on vocational training related to fintech. So I'm noting I've got 1 minute left. I wanted to spend that time quickly, Andrew, just on Tech Central. As I've been alluding to this session, we do have a scale-up fintech focus in the center of Sydney that's has been deemed Tech Central, and as you can see on the left-hand side, our pure aims around attracting 100 new scale-up companies. Now that's across a variety of sectors, but fintech being included in that. The government is also looking at how do we unlock affordable space for scaling companies into the market, and as you can see, our founding partners are Atlassian and NEC. And with that, Andrew, I'm quite aware that I've probably just about gone to time, but on this slide, again, here's the support the government can provide you with. On the right-hand side, specifically, I've identified the Tech Central affordable space discussion that I'm keen to have with other groups, as well as the government assets around the Sydney Startup Hub, which as a launchpad for companies coming in from the UK, keen to get you across what the criterion is to potentially utilize that space as a bit of a short-term launchpad. And then we've got a variety of grants and products that can help support companies scaling into this space. So I'll leave it at that, Andrew.
Excellent, Corey. Spoken like a true Sydney sider, taking advantage of every second provided to you. Well done. There's a lot of details in those slides. I'm sure they'll be made available for our guests later on. But thank you very much, Corey, for that very insightful and brief presentation indeed.